Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and this is Wednesday, September the 1st. I'm happy to be here. This is a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, one child abuse survivor to another. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and everybody who will be listening to the archive. I'm just waking up and having some coffee, and I wanted to look at, we sort of finished up with the healing and hiding places of shame and with hope for survivors yesterday. There's some really, you can kind of go back and look at that at www.hope_survivors.com/shame.html. And there's all kinds of, they do go on to talk about a lot of the healing portion of that, which I didn't want to go too much into because it's kind of repetitive, and I think if people want to take a look at it, please do, because I know I did take a look through there. And as far as how to heal from toxic shame, and we might actually go back and relook at some of that, but I wanted to continue on. I found some interesting information regarding toxic parents and also the critical inner voice, and I wanted to look at that as well. But I think, as long as we just keep reaching out and looking for that help wherever we can find it, right? That's the whole issue. No matter what, whether it's a therapist, counselor, group support, a good friend, self-help, just make sure you do, you do get some help, right? And not suffer alone on your own, right? So that's what we'll be talking about today and probably tomorrow. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows. I just want to make sure everybody knows that I'm a survivor, and I'm just looking for information all the time, right, that will help me to understand and identify why I'm feeling the way that I do sometimes and why I behave a certain way. I'm constantly trying to to seek out information to make sure I'm not self-sabotaging or, these things that I know that I'm doing that I need to stop doing, and or do a better job at, right? So I'm still working on it, and I think everybody, is that's what life is all about, trying to grow and to keep growing and keep learning and keep finding ourselves, you know what I mean? And especially if you've been abused, in domestic violence situation or child abuse, it's absolutely horrible to have to come out from that and then try to do all this, because first we have to face all this stuff, then figure out how to put it in its place, and then move on, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows. So I'm not a professional. Make sure that you do reach out and get some help, from a real professional, licensed person, right? This is so important. Or a group support. Like I like online group support because you can remain anonymous if you want to. You can chat when you feel like it. It's not like you have to show up someplace. It's just, these people are there and they're hurting too, and they're a lot of them are just like you and me, and they're working on their healing journey. And so, I found the group support, online group support, very helpful. So just so you're not alone, right? That's the whole thing. And if you're a young person, make sure that you have someone listen to the show with you, and that way they can help you decide, whether or not you should be listening to it, because I have a lot, I cover a lot of adult material on my shows regarding child abuse and everything to do with adult survivor issues and child abuse. And so I want to make sure that young people under the age of 18 know that I'm asking you to have permission to listen to my show. Get someone who's older to listen to the show with you, and make sure that it is something you should be listening to, right? And also, then they can help you if you have questions. This is so important, right? So I want to take a look at this website here. This is the toxic parenting, because I've heard this phrase toxic parent a few times, not very often. You don't hear people talking about toxic parents too often, but usually most people would say, well, my parents were abusive, or my parents were this or that, but not necessarily toxic. And so I wanted to take a look at toxic parents. What is a toxic parent? Because it kind of goes along with what we're talking about, which is toxic shame and that whole thing, shame and rage, and what happens to children when they grow up in these abusive homes with these abusive people. It is toxic. You know what I mean? And toxic means poisonous, noxious, or contaminated. And I found this website. It's called www.consistent-parenting-advice.com /toxic-parent.html. And this is written, I believe that this website is, it's all coinciding with John Bradshaw's book, as well as I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here, as well as the lady who's written this book called Toxic Parents, Overcoming Their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life. And this is written by, I think it's Dr. Susan Forward. I want to make sure. Yes, Susan Forward, Forward, and there's another lady who's also, and her name is also associated with this website. So this is some really good information from people who have done a lot of work and a lot of looking into the whole situation of toxic shame and toxic parenting, right? So I wanted to just take a look at it because I know no matter what you want to call it, abusive parents, whether you want to call them toxic or whether you want, or even abusive siblings, let's just say, abusive people who would be around children and who would cause these children to cause and inflict pain and inflict, their own garbage onto children, right? Is I call them, I would think they are toxic, you know what I mean? Poisonous, noxious, contaminated, right? Because obviously, people who behave like that have problems. So, it says the phrase toxic parent was coined to describe parents whose own negative behavior grossly inflicts emotional damage, which contaminates their children's sense of self. And this means parents who abuse their children verbally, physically, and or sexually, as well as parents who are inadequate or ignore their children's emotional needs. Sometimes these patterns are so established they continue into adulthood, and often they are not either recognized or addressed. And so that's the truth, right? Many times, I hear lots of people talking about, maybe they wouldn't even say, okay, I was abused as a child, because maybe they weren't, but their parents were still so noxious, and so toxic, right? Like, and even though when they get older, they're still the same and they never change. There's a lot of toxic, noxious people out there, and people have to be responsible for their own behavior, and that's what I think. I just feel like, if I don't like somebody's behavior, I'll call them on it. You know what I mean? I'll just be like, your behavior sucks, right? I don't care if it, especially in my own family, like, you know what I mean? Because why should these people think that they have the right to put their garbage on us? You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to come at you guys honestly here this morning. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous what people think that they can do to other people. They need to get help. They're the ones that need the help. You know what I mean? And here they are, pushing their garbage on children, abusing children, because that's abuse. I'm sorry, but it is. All people have to do is wake up and smell the coffee. And also they do it to their loved ones. People will do that to their wives, to their husbands, to their whole families. Siblings will do that to siblings. And just treat each other like garbage. And it's all because they do not want to take personal responsibility for their own behavior because they think their behavior is fine. Usually when somebody calls me on something, if they say, look, I don't like something you're doing, I'll sit down and talk to them about it, and I'll try to, and I usually generally apologize, because if I notice that it's something that I'm doing and it did hurt some of their feelings or whatever, I'll be like, I'm sorry, I did not mean that. That's not what I intended. And, I do apologize, and I'll try to do a better job. I'm the first one to admit that I make mistakes. But you know what's wrong with people? Those people that will not admit that they make a mistake, there's something wrong with those kind of people. They will not admit. They won't be able to look at themselves and say, gee, I made a mistake. That's right. I must have, I didn't mean to hurt that person's feelings. I guess I must have made, I should apologize because that's a mistake. You know what I mean? People quite often think their own behavior is perfect and everybody else's behavior is not. My parents were like that, and my parents were two of the biggest assholes on this planet. And I'm just going to put it out there bluntly here this morning because I'm trying to quit smoking. I'm a little bit on edge here. But the thing is, they just figured they should be allowed to do and say whatever they wanted to their children. Now, they were as toxic as can possibly be. And they had a lot of support, They had people that loved them, cared about them. That's because my parents could be very, very nice to other people. And they were. And my dad still is. He's very nice to other people. He can even be nice to his family when he wants to be. But he can be the biggest jerk, otherwise, because he's mentally ill. You know what I mean? But my mom, she was, I would say, the worst out of the two because she was so vicious and so violent, But, it's just, why do parents think they have the right to do this? And then my mom, if anybody questioned her behavior, she was like, oh, no, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just everyone else, right? And I mean, that's garbage, right? It's like parents need to take a look at what they're doing and say, okay, if we're wrong, and we need to change it. You know, nobody's perfect, and parenting is not, no one's perfect. No child is perfect, and no parent is perfect. People are going to make mistakes. But why can't a parent just admit that they made a mistake? They always want their children to admit that they make mistakes, but they're not willing to do the same thing. You know, the one thing I do give my dad credit for is that he actually admits that he made a lot of mistakes. And my mom would never admit that, right? Not in a million years she wouldn't admit that, right? I give my dad some credit for that because it's hard, it's not easy to have your youngest daughter in your face telling you, look, you know, I'm blabbing to the world. I wrote a book, and I told the world about what you did. You know what I mean? He knows I wrote the book, and he's handled it quite well. And the thing is like, you know, I called him on it, and I said, you know, it's true. You know, everything I said in that book, that's how I feel, and that's the truth. And he's just like, he says, you know, you're right. I made mistakes. You know, does it make amends? Does it make up for all of that, you know, hurt and harm done? No, it doesn't really. But the thing is I have to then give him a little bit of credit for that because he's not sitting there just going, well, you know, I was perfect. You know, even though sometimes, you know, people who are mentally ill will quite often do that. But he's actually even willing to say that, you know, now he made tons of mistakes, you know, and he's told some of his friends and whatnot that he knows personally that have talked to me, you know, that he didn't necessarily do the right thing by his family. So, see, I have to give him some credit for that, and I have to appreciate that in its own right, you know, and give him some credit. You know, and move on with that, right? But the thing is like my mom would never ever admit that anything she was doing was wrong, even though she almost killed me a couple of times, and even though she destroyed my life as a young child, you know, she would never ever take responsibility for that. You know what I mean? She would never take responsibility for any of the abuse she inflicted on any of the family members. So a lot of parents are like that. They want to be able to treat their whoever, you know, a certain way, but they will never ever, you know, admit that they need help or that what they're doing is wrong. It says there are some toxic parents whose consistent negative patterns of parenting leave a legacy of guilt and shame within their children, and worse still, there are parents whose outright cruelty would be considered illegal if exhibited toward animals, let alone their own children, and that's the truth. It says, where do parents like this learn these despicable patterns of behavior? It says, yes, you're quite right, usually from their own parents, who in turn learned it from theirs. However, few people make the connection between their parents' parenting style and their own emotional problems. And often these emotional difficulties only become apparent to them as they become parents themselves. And so it says, as parents, we all make mistakes. I mean, and that's the truth, right? I mean, who's perfect? No kid's perfect, I tell you that. So you try to say a parent is perfect. It's not true at all. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as perfection on this planet. Everybody knows that. So anybody who thinks that is wrong, right? It says that it can be very disturbing to finally see our parents with feet of clay and to admit that they have hurt us, right? It says verbal abuse from parents to children is toxic. It's not seen as significant as it can be accepted, taken for granted family behavior. However, the depth at which it leaves its marks can be devastating. You know, verbal abuse and is absolutely horrible. And, you know, people like to think that, you know, physical abuse is a lot worse. And I think that there's always emotional and psychological abuse with physical abuse, right? So physical abuse, and it's all the same to me. I just don't sit there and say, well, one form of abuse is worse than the other. You know what I mean? Because it's all very painful. It all hurts, and I don't think there's any way you can say that one type is worse than the other, especially coming from people who have experienced it all. You know what I mean? It's like it all hurts extremely bad. And what really leaves the scars is the emotional, the psychological, the verbal, that stuff, you know. That leaves the scars on the inside of your heart, you know, where the other scars, you know, they heal and they whatever, maybe they don't, it doesn't matter. It's just what's going on in your heart, you know, that hurts. And you know, the very core of your whole being, right? And that's what parents do when they don't accept us for who we are and don't love us for who we are, and verbally abuse us, emotionally abuse us, psychologically abuse us, right? And that's what my mother was famous at doing. Well, both my parents, right? And so not only was there physical abuse, there was a lot of verbal and emotional, psychological abuse going on, right? So it's very, very hard. And so, I mean, I would say my parents were definitely toxic parents, right? It says blame and shame here. Toxic parents, blame and shame. Unfortunately, children of toxic parents learn to blame themselves for their parents' appalling lack and tend to grow into adults who are burdened with very low self-esteem and poor self-image. It says the wonderful news here is that the past cannot be changed, but the future certainly can. I like that. So, that's very true. We can't change the past, and that's what, I've come to terms with in the last couple of years, is looking back on everything thinking, well, okay, I can't change the past. I'm going to have to change the way I see myself and the way that I see this life, And that was a big turning point for me, a big step, to realize that, hey, I can change the future. I don't have to suffer in silence. I don't have to sit and feel this shame on my own anymore. And I don't have to sit around and feel like a lesser than or, I'm a worthless person just because of just because of the abuse that I suffered, right? I mean, that's what I always thought, that I was just going to always be sitting in this same, the same feelings that I had, for like 41 years, right, until I started on my healing journey. And I thought, well, this is all my life is ever going to be. I'm just going to be sitting around, misery and suffering for the rest of my life, because that's all I could identify with. That's what I knew, right? So, even though I could experience joy and happiness, I've been on trips. I've done things in my lifetime that are fun and exciting. I've had fun. It's not like I've been sitting around 365 days a year, moping and complaining for 41 years. It's just the fact that at the end of the day, when I sit around by myself, I have all of these memories and all of this pain still so deep inside because I never let it out. So even I could go and have a great time and, whatever, have fun with friends, and just enjoy even doing things on my own. And that's the whole thing. I can get enjoyment out of life. Thank God. You know what I mean? Where so many people can't, right? I mean, I was able to do that. But in the meantime, I'm stuck deep down inside of myself, so that when I have some quiet time to myself to sit down and listen to what's going on inside my heart, I could feel the pain, and I could feel every single thing from my inner child that was needing to come out. All of this stuff. She was screaming and raging, to get this stuff out because she was in pain, my small self, you know what I mean? So I was able to laugh and have a good time and then, come home and sit around and think, is this ever going to change? Am I ever going to get out of this pain? You know what I mean? And that's the whole thing. And I'm so glad I stuck around long enough to figure it out. I hope you will too, right? And so we can work on it. We can change the future, right? We can't change the past. We can't change what happened to us. But we can certainly work on, on having a good life. And I think that's what we deserve, right? I mean, if you've grown up abused, you certainly don't deserve any more abuse, right? And that's what I did. I put my foot down. I said, no more. I will not ever allow anyone to ever abuse me ever again. And if they do, and if somebody like a coworker or something like that, and I call them on it, I want an apology. I'm just not taking any more garbage from anybody else, and I don't care. And if they don't apologize, they're out of my life. And I've actually let a few people go out of my life because they would not apologize, and they did not care that they hurt my feelings. And then they were like, well, you're just too wounded anyway, so, your feelings would have been hurt anyway. And I'm like, you know what, if that's the way you feel, you don't need to be my friend. Out of my life, you go. Bye-bye. And I shut a lot of people out, actually. Why? Because they were codependent people, narcissistic, and they were only going to hurt my feelings and continue to hurt me as long as I would stay in the relationship, right? But I recognized that they were causing me pain, and I thought, man, this is not cool. They're supposed to be my friend. They're not supposed to be hurting me, So, and if they're not going to apologize, which I asked for an apology and I did not get it, so I was like, that's it. The door is shut. Bye-bye. You know what I mean? Because I've had enough crap from people my whole life, and especially two people that were supposed to love and care for me, when I was a small child and did not get it. You know what I mean? I've had enough abuse, and I think that, we as survivors, if you're a survivor of child abuse, you certainly don't deserve any more abuse from anyone, whether it's a partner, your husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, partner, friends, coworkers, you just, family members, siblings, you just don't deserve any more abuse, right? So I don't take any more abuse off of anybody, and if people accidentally do something to hurt my feelings, well, it's an accident, that's totally cool. But if people intentionally do it and then will not apologize, they're out of my life just like that. Boom, gone. I have no problem with shutting the door on people, because why? I care about myself, and I didn't come this far to sit around and take more crap off people. You know what I mean? I decided that 3.5 years ago, thank God, sitting on the couch, realizing that, hey, I do count, I do matter, what is going on here? I was going to let myself be destroyed by this and, allow people to drive me even further into the ground than I already had been driven. And I thought, no. I don't deserve this. I never deserved any of that treatment, and neither do you, right? So we have to find out what's going to help us to get through this. And we have to, to get that help, no matter what we have to do, whether it's counseling, like I said, or therapist, or group support, self-help, whatever. Just make sure that, because we deserve to have a good life. And I tell you what, this just makes me angry. What people just think this is just like nuts. Just, how could it be a big deal? Well, if you've never experienced child abuse and you've never been abused, then you wouldn't know. Because how would you know? You couldn't possibly know, right? So I don't blame people who have not experienced abuse and don't realize the actual, what it does to a person. How can you blame them? They don't know, right? Thank God, because you don't want everyone to have been abused, right? The whole thing is that people just need to open up their hearts a little bit and, realize that, hey, we are wounded and we need help, And sometimes people just can't be that help, and that's sad, because that's what I'm talking about, losing friends and stuff like that. Sometimes people just, it's not maybe that they don't want to. They might want to, but they don't know how. And so, then frustration starts and whatnot, right? So, and I used to be able to think that, my best friends should be able to always help me out, and really what I needed was help. I needed counseling, therapist, group support, whatever. Just reach out for some real help. And so that's what I did, thank God, I want to look at the next portion of this. This is called Toxic Parents, the Critical Inner Voice, because this is so important. This is what happens to me every day. Critical inner voice. I have a real problem with it, and it talks to me all the time, and it's just left over from the abuse that I suffered. I'm sure of it. It's quite often my mom's voice, and not generally my dad's voice. It's usually my mom's voice, and I can hear it, and it's just my own inner critical voice, right? But I can hear it in my mother's words, as because of the abuse that she put on me, and so it's almost like I just suffer with this all the time, right? And so I wanted to take a look at this, because I know a lot of people do, and I'm sure of it, right? People, that inner voice that just tells us these hurtful things, and it's like we hear the hurtful comments over and over again, right? And that's what we have to learn to negate. We have to learn to turn that around, and that's what I'm working on right now. That's what I'm doing, and it's a process. I'm having to go through it. I'm going through it on my own, not going to any counseling or therapist, right? But what I'm doing is working on changing my inner voice, right? To say different things and to believe different things, right? So I want to actually just talk about this for a little bit here. And it says this is from the same website, www.consistent-parenting-toxic-parents.html. And this is Toxic Parents, the Critical Inner Voice. And it says, the most powerful result of having toxic parents is that we are left with low self-esteem and a strong inner critical voice that speaks continually to us of our guilt, our shame, and our wrongs, right? And it says, what is this inner critical voice? It says, it is the voice of abuse, of strong verbal abuse within ourselves. This inner voice, they list here, attacks us and criticizes us, blames us and compares us, shames us and hurts us, and makes us feel guilty. And this is just the truth, this is what I hear rolling around in my head quite often throughout the day. It tells us we're stupid, fat, selfish, ugly, and dumb. It even convinces us that it knows what everyone else thinks. The powerful voice came into being when we were children and works overtime to undermine our sense of self-worth at every turn. It had its birth during our earliest childhood years when we first experienced feelings of not being acceptable for who we were by our toxic parents. It says the more toxic your parents were, the more toxic the power of your inner voice is. Excuse me. It says if you received many messages as a child that you were not okay for who you were, then your inner critic will be a strong voice, constantly upbraiding you today in the same way. And see, that's just it. It's more than memories. It's like something it's like a record player. I mean, I'm sure people, I know I've heard this from other survivors who would say it's like a CD that keeps playing over and over and over, and it's the same words, and it's my mother's voice, and it never stops. It plays 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and most of the time I can tune it out. And sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's pretty powerful, and it'll be right there, and I can, I have to sort of work around it to think of other things, right? Just depending on what kind of day I'm having, maybe how tired I am, or if I've had a bad day, and it seems like all this stuff starts to come back, right? And that's just from the verbal and psychological, damage, and verbal abuse, calling children names, making them feel bad, and just constantly shaming them and making them feel like they're just worthless and useless, right? I mean, that's the way I grew up, right? So I hear my mother's voice all the time, and quite often I'll be sitting around, especially if I'm just sitting around doing not too much, just hanging out, I'll hear her telling me the same exact things she was telling me before. That's just my inner critical voice, coming out with it still hasn't let go of that stuff. So that's what I'm working on, is to change that negative stuff, right? It says if it makes us feel so bad, why do we listen to it? This is interesting. It says mostly because it's so insidious, so much a part of who we are that we hardly notice. At times it can even seem reasonable and friendly. After all, we believe what it is telling us, and it feels just so familiar and recognizable. Often it completely mirrors the sound of your own voice or that of our mother or father. It says it seems to just belong. But this voice is toxic and astonishingly harmful, constantly blaming, finding fault, criticizing, and judging us. And it says here, it speaks to us through words, through pictures, through our emotions. It dredges up shameful incidents from our past and plays back old scenes like reruns at the movies. See, this is the sort of stuff that happens to people who have survived this kind of stuff. And the only reason I'm laughing is because I'm in my mid-40s and this is still going on, you know what I mean? And I thought, how long do I have to be living with this stuff, you know what I mean? Before it would have really affected me, and now because I'm on my healing journey quite a bit further down my healing journey than I used to be, I don't have the same feelings about it that I used to. I'm able to handle this stuff a lot better than I used to. Thank God. I'm learning how to cope and learning how to deal with it, right? Because I finally admitted that this was not my fault, and I did not have anything to do with it. And all of this garbage that was put on me was not my fault, and I didn't deserve it. No child deserves to be treated like that. And once I started to realize that and started to reach out to my inner child, I started to realize, hey, I do deserve to have a good life. I mean, I do deserve to move on and heal. And I am going to do that, because I deserve it. So, we're not going to sit around here and suffer for the rest of my life in this dysfunctional BS that my parents put on me, and that my dysfunctional family still is going through, because they will not. They're in their own dysfunction, and I'm just leaving them there because I want to move on. You know what I mean? I want to heal, and I want to be able to move forward. So I won't be able to really hang out with them that much because they're dysfunctional. You know what I mean? And they're toxic, right? So it's hard, right? But I thought, I deserve it. So we have about a minute left. We'll pick this up tomorrow morning. So we deserve to have a good life and to heal, right? At our own, that's why I say at your own pace, you reach out and get some help, and make sure that you just don't suffer in silence and suffer on your own. It's so sad. It's a sad place to be. And you just know that there's help out there, there's hope out there, right? And keep hanging on and just never, ever, ever give up. That's what I got to say. I wish my brothers were here today. I wish they would not have given up. My two brothers, that hurts me deeply, because I know how their lives were, and I know that they did not reach out and they didn't try to get any help, and it's so sad. I wish somebody could have reached them, and I wish that I could have reached them, you know what I mean? And then I was going to head down the same path, and I'm so glad that I didn't. So I just want to be one more person to tell you to reach out and get some help, right? And don't suffer on your own. And call a crisis line if you have to. Call somebody. Make sure you do get some help. So we'll see you guys. I'll be back on tonight on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, 10 p.m., and also on my own show after that. And have a great day, everybody. Get a hold of me, Facebook or Blog Talk Radio if you need anything. And otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow morning, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. Have a great day, everybody, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.